Hello and good morning. I'm Jeff Cole, and welcome to Oregon Bio's Makers and Biomarkers. Each week, this Zoomcast will feature a different Oregon Bio member. We'd like to thank our Oregon Bio Platinum members for making this program possible, and you can see their names listed on the screen. And now I'd like to welcome today's panelist, Katie Pettinger from Gadusol Laboratories. Katie Pettinger has a decade of experience with technology commercialization, working with researchers to bring their innovations to market. And now, literally from the depths of the seas, Katie is working to bring us a new generation of sunscreen protection. Welcome to the program, Katie.
Hi, Jeff.
Good morning. I know before we get deep into conversation that you do have a video you'd like to share with us, and we can go to that whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so we just actually finished our first little promo video to kind of more succinctly tell our story and the problem and the solution that we're working on. So give me 1 second and I can share my screen.
There's nothing like enjoying the sunny outdoors with your family and loved ones. But the last thing you want after a fun day of play is a sunburn, or worse. But recent studies have shown that the sunscreen products that consumers rely on to mitigate cancer risk actually could be causing harm, both to humans and the environment.
What recent studies have found is that these questionable UV filters, particularly oxybenzone, which was in the majority of sunscreen sold in the US a few years ago, actually absorb into your skin and accumulate in your bloodstream at levels that far exceed the safety threshold set by the FDA. So chances are when you go to purchase a sunscreen, you want something that's easy and comfortable to apply and wear and gives you effective sun protection. Now, for many consumers, what that means is a spray formulation that dries clear. Basically, you spray it and you forget about it. But unfortunately, the reason why those formulations are so fantastic are because they use chemical UV filters. Now, if you don't want to put these harmful chemicals on your body, your only other option is to use a mineral-based sunscreen. But unfortunately, these formulations are white, thick, pasty creams that are just frankly annoying to use and wear.
At Gadusol Laboratories in Corvallis, Oregon, a team of scientists has been exploring this problem, with a focus on the cutting-edge tools of synthetic biology to develop sustainable, natural solutions for sun protection.
At Gadusol Labs, we understand the need for effective but comfortable sunscreen solutions.
Gadusol is a fascinating compound in a family of natural compounds that functions as a powerful antioxidant and free radical scavenger in marine organisms. What we have discovered is that Gadusol can provide a significant, safe SPF boost in sunscreen products.
Gadusol was originally found in fish eggs. We found the genes that are responsible to make Gadusol in fish, reptile, amphibian, and birds, and we took the two genes and expressed them in yeast and got the yeast to produce the very same compounds that fish produce naturally.
With global sunscreen sales forecasted to reach $10 billion by 2022, the demand for sunscreens is growing, and formulators are struggling to create safe, effective, and comfortable products. And as a mom of a 2-year-old and another one on the way, I want to make sure that the sunscreen I'm putting on my kids is safe and works well.
With an issued patent and more patents pending, the team is hard at work securing partnerships and completing necessary formulation development, with the goal of getting Gadusol and Gadusol-related compounds into skincare products as quickly as possible.
And that's a fantastic video, and thank you for sharing that with us. And it really does explain so much about the fantastic story behind what you're trying to do. I'd like to ask, how did you get started with Gadusol Laboratories, and where did this idea of using, the source of a sunscreen from the sea, where did that come from?
Yeah, so in one of my previous positions, I was actually a tech scout for Virtue Lab, which used to be known as Oregon Best. And I was actually tasked with going around to all of the Oregon state-funded universities and looking at what the faculty members were working on to try to see what we could pull out that was had the potential to turn into a high impact product or service. And so in the course of that position, which was really fun, be able to have all those conversations and talk with a lot of different faculty members and researchers across all the different universities, I came across my current co-founders who told me this story of how they had recently discovered that fish and marine organisms, and actually Gadusol is found in other aquatic-based organisms like reptiles and amphibians, that scientists had known about this compound for a few decades, but it was assumed that these organisms actually acquired it somehow through their diet. Like nobody really knew where it came from. They were sort of able to identify it in the organisms, but didn't understand the source. And so the researchers that I came into contact with at Oregon State made the discovery of actually they don't acquire it through their diet, they synthesize it themselves. And so they were able to identify the genes responsible for producing Gadusol in these organisms, isolate them, and then transplant them into a yeast production system using synthetic biology technology. And for the first time, be able to actually produce this same sunscreen compound in a laboratory environment, albeit in pretty tiny amounts, but still it was like sort of a proof of concept experiment, and it worked. And so I was like, guys, this is exciting. Like no one else that, you all know of has been able to do this before. They've just been able to play with extracting it from these different organisms, which is extremely inefficient and expensive, as you can imagine. So I said, let's go ahead and start a company and see what we can do to get this project moving and to de-risk it and see what happens.
Well, that's fantastic. Of course, when I think of yeast, I think of a microbrew, but yeast is really very much something that is an essence of life and creating life, right? That's a basic element of our organisms and our systems. So I can see the tie-in that creating this, synthesizing this would have to do with yeast. But I mean, what at this stage, what are the problems that you are working on solving, and what do you find exciting about its potential solution?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, no one had done, well, like I said, no one had really done this before. So of course, with any technology that you spin out of the university, there's a de-risking process to answer all of the important questions and make sure that even though it sounds cool, can it really do what you think it can do? So we applied for some National Science Foundation SBIR funding and have received all of those awards. And that has allowed us to basically improve our lab scale production system and do all the necessary safety and efficacy testing. So, a lot of times people get excited about natural products, which is great, but just because something's natural doesn't mean it's not toxic. Like, think of a mushroom or maybe like a hot pepper. Yes, you can eat it, but do you really want to put it on your skin? And so we had to go through all of the typical cosmetic safety tests to make sure that this particular compound was not going to cause any issues. So skin irritation, eye irritation, understanding how folks responded to it in terms of allergies, toxicology tests. I mean, I could just go on and on. There's a whole number of tests and they're a little expensive. So thankfully we have had this NSF funding to help de-risk that. Once we've had those test results back, the next step was to do in vitro testing. So this is where you use cadaver skin in a lab instead of testing on real people. You send it away to a lab and say, okay, we know it's safe, but what can it really do in terms of SPF protection, or not SPF protection, UV protection, and how does that translate to an SPF number? And our results were pretty amazing, especially whenever you pair it with a mineral, like a safe mineral sunscreen. And so after that, the next step was to do it on people and to have our first clinical trial of sorts. And when I say clinical trial, sunscreens are a very strange product because they're nowhere else in the world are they regulated as drugs except in the US. So like they're this blend of a drug, but with a cosmetic product price. And so the FDA has a list of particular active ingredients in sunscreen products that have been approved. And I can get into this a little bit later, but the way we're positioning Gadusol as an SPF booster and a really powerful antioxidant, because there's really no need to get it approved as an active. We have some other ingredients that would be better suited for that. But basically what we did was we mixed it into a formulation with zinc oxide and then sent it away to an SPF testing lab and had it tested on a clinical trial, so in vivo on people, and our results were equally amazing. So we're kind of at the stage where we're pretty excited about all of these results, and now we're moving forward with the next stage of the company with partnership development and go-to-market strategies.
That's fantastic. It's really exciting to hear about a new alternative for sunscreen or sunscreen-related applications. I'm curious what you said. You referred to like, and correct me if I misstated it wrong, but the FDA has a certain approved list of these sunscreen ingredients, but that's a thing unique to the United States. Does the rest of the world look to the FDA to kind of set that bar? Is it imperative, or could you go for other markets aside that?
Yeah, there's definitely room for markets outside the US. So outside of the US, sunscreens are regulated with a little bit of nuance there. They're regulated as cosmetics. So they're still regulated, but it's not quite the same as the FDA. The FDA has the most stringent requirements for getting onto the active ingredient list. So if you go to Europe, there's a lot more sunscreens that you actually have access to than you do in the US, for example.
Oh, very interesting. Now at this stage, how do you intend to get Gadusol and related compounds to market?
Yeah, so one of the, like I mentioned, the FDA has this, it's called a monograph. So it's an approved list of active sunscreen ingredients. And anytime you go to the store to buy a sunscreen product, you're going to see something that's listed as the active ingredient, which fits what the FDA standards are for those particular ingredients. Our value proposition for Gadusol is that it works really well with zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, which are the mineral sunscreens. They're the safe ones. So all of the other sunscreens, oxybenzone, octinoxate, octocrylene, avobenzone, et cetera, they all have been proven to show harm to the environment. I think the video talked about this a little bit with bleaching of coral reefs. They cause issues with fertility in fish. They're proven, some of them are proven endocrine disruptors. And then recently the FDA actually did a study in 2019 and 2020 to measure the blood absorption levels of these chemicals into your body, which surprisingly they had never done before. And they found that some of these ingredients, particularly oxybenzone, goes into your bloodstream and stays there at levels that far exceed the FDA safety threshold. And I think they measured it up to 21 days or something, and it was still in there. Another study showed that one of these ingredients has been shown in the urine of up to 97% of Americans, just with a random test. So the evidence is there that a lot of these synthetic chemicals, if not all of them, because of the way they work, they absorb into your body and they stay there, and nobody really understands, what does that mean? What are those long-term side effects? So you could postulate that perhaps, even though sunscreens are supposed to help avoid skin cancer, how do we know that it's actually not contributing to the problem as well? So the only two safe ingredients that are approved by the FDA, that environmentally safe in non-nano forms, are zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. The problem with these ingredients is that if you really want to go 100% safe, they work because they physically sit on top of your skin. So they're almost like an article of clothing. They reflect the UV light off of your skin. The problem with these are that if you ever use them, they formulations are awful. Like they're thick and pasty and they're really annoying to take off. And you just don't want to put it on your skin. It's not like something where you just spray about it. And like the video was talking about, you just spray about it and forget it. So enter Gadusol. Because of Gadusol's really amazing antioxidant properties, we've been able to generate data to show that it drastically improves the SPF of a sunscreen. So what that means is instead of having to have a product that has quite a bit of zinc oxide in it, and the more zinc oxide you put in it, the worse the formulation, we can put a smaller amount of zinc oxide in it, add in some Gadusol, and we have a much nicer formulation that people actually want to wear. And because of the way that, and I won't get into the details here, but because each active sunscreen ingredient covers a particular part of the UV spectrum, Gadusol works really well with zinc oxide. They're very synergistic in relationship. In the meantime, we've actually developed bioengineered Gadusol derivatives that cover the UVA spectrum. And we just applied for an NIH SPIR to be able to pursue some more funding, to be able to explore what those new ingredients can do that we've developed, because we think that that has a really amazing potential to actually go onto the FDA monograph and protect against UVA.
Well, that's just so interesting. And when you talk about the zinc, actually, I am familiar with that. As a kid, I think my dad bought this, and we'd go skiing, and he'd go out with a solid white nose out onto the ski slopes. So it works, like you say, but it's not exactly. It's not pretty. But and it's fascinating to think about that you're looking at different ranges of exposure within the UV range and tackling that strategically. In terms of approaching market, when do you think that we might see sunscreen that contains Gadusol?
I hope in 2 years. We're right in the middle of negotiating some partnership agreements. And in the meantime, our goal is to be able to launch our own consumer brand. But we're, as I sort of alluded to, we're at this inflection point where we just have this data back. And so we're right on the verge of moving forward with that. So the next 6 months or so, we'll have those plans finalized, and then we'll hopefully be able to move forward and have a product to market. My goal is 24 months.
That'd be fantastic. I'd like to just touch on or ask a little bit about your own story and your relationship with bioscience in Oregon and how you came to be at this point.
So so my career started, I actually worked for several years at a Department of Energy national lab, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then I transferred out to Oregon when I was working there because there's a sister site here in Albany, Oregon. And as a part of my position there, we've been working with researchers my entire career, but one of the things that I focused on there was how to help them spin out the technologies that they're working on to actually make a difference in the world, instead of just getting a lot of federal funding and developing the next cool innovation that doesn't really take the economics of how to get it to market into account. And so while at the national lab, I just sort of had a new appreciation for how difficult it was to actually push a technology out the door. It requires a blend of the right funding, the right talent, the right timing, a certain kind of opportunity. And so I really wanted to try to help to play a more proactive role in shepherding these technologies out the door. And so my career basically has been focused on that for I guess my entire career, to some extent or the other. So whether that was a tech scout for Virtue Lab, I worked for an entrepreneurship training organization for a while. And I also hold a position at Oregon State University where I help them think through the different technologies that they have at the university and how to create the right channels and approaches to pull those out of the university. Does that answer your question?
Oh, it certainly does. And so now it sounds like this is a natural outgrowth that you are now fulfilling a role that you helped others follow.
Right. So I kind of watched all this happen and thought, I want to do this too. And actually being in the thick of it and doing it and managing a team and a project and, partnership development is completely different than just being sort of an ecosystem partner. It's a really good experience. So, my long-term goal is to be able to make this successful and then use all this experience and expertise to be able to continue to replicate the model.
So for those out there that may be anticipating being in your shoes as a startup or as an innovator, do you have some sort of general points of advice, or what's a good path or foundation to set for a project like this?
Yeah, well, so each project is different. I mean, each technology space is different. It kind of depends on what the innovation is. It's not easy, even with, Oregon offers a lot of support in terms of like business Oregon grants and helping to get SBIR funding. But it's not easy, but it's very rewarding. So we've been at this for 3.5 years, and we're just now at the point where we're able to start thinking about go to market and how we're going to make that happen in a more tangible, realistic way than just kind of like a theoretical, narrative written somewhere. And so, it's a long journey and requires a lot of determination and perseverance, but it's very exciting whenever you see your hard work actually turn into something, and just understanding that it has the potential to make such a huge impact.
That's terrific. We have a couple minutes left. If anyone would like to ask a question, we have a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. You can put a question in there, or put a question in chat, and we'd get to that. So, Katie, what are your immediate next steps as a company over the next 6 months or a year? You've mentioned that you're continuing your efforts to bring this into a position where it can actually be on the shelves in about 2 years. Is there some other activities along that way?
Yeah, so right now we're gearing up for a seed stage fundraising round. And at the same time, we're in negotiation discussions with a strategic partner who would be able to help us basically take our lab scale production process from A to Z, with basically taking that whole workload off of us so we can just focus on product development and formulation development. And so the next step for us would be to expand our capabilities to be able to really explore everything that Gadusol can do in skincare formulations, possibly going into hair care, other sorts of personal care product applications. And then I'm working really closely with a former vice president from L'Oreal, who's interested in helping us move forward with developing a consumer brand. So it's a little bit of an interesting strategy because we're first need to understand the different opportunities in terms of formulation development, and then taking those findings and putting them into a product line development.
That's fantastic. Katie, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning on Makers and Biomarkers. Wish you all the luck of your endeavor. It sounds very exciting and very beneficial for us all to have some new safer sunscreen products. So thanks again for joining us, and thank everyone out there for attending our webinar today. And you can check our website for upcoming webinars. In 1 week, we will have Lazarus 3D. And again, everyone, have a great day and take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.